Hey everyone, welcome back to my poker vlog. This is episode number 4. I played 2 sessions of poker this past week that I'll be sharing with you. So my first session was a short one. It was a 30-minute session. It was a $300 loss. So I unfortunately did not capture anything. I attempted to and did not realize until after the fact that I had my camera set up wrong. I was recording from my front-facing camera instead of my back-facing camera. So all I recorded was my lower torso in the rail. So I could talk about a couple of the hands though that were the biggest ones. I had one player in particular that was clearly there just to gamble, and unfortunately I just had nothing hold when I had a big hand, or nothing hit when I had a non-pair premium hand. So I'll tell you about the first one. I had pocket queens. I was the big blind. It was a 6-handed game. And I'm sitting with about $150. I bought in for $150 twice. So it's my first stack of $150. Before the flop, the gambler player that I mentioned was the first to act. He limped in for $2. We saw a button raised to $15. The small blind flatted for $15. And I decided to re-raise with my pocket queens for $65. So a little more than a third of my stack. Gambler player that limped in, I mentioned, he cold calls my $65 raise, and so the other player who initially raised felt like he was priced in. He told me afterwards, and he decided to call, and the fourth player called as well. So we've got a large pot brewing. I've got queens. It's $260, but I'm going to be second to act and out of position after the flop. And unfortunately, we see a flop come out of, if I remember correctly, it was Ace Jack 5. I know there was an ace for sure. And the small blind, who was first to act before me, initially leads into everyone for, I think it was $60. So, he's leading into 3 other players. I've got 2 more players behind me. I can't imagine I'm good here. And even though it's only $60 into a $260 pot, I decided to just fold and keep the rest of my stack for another spot. I lost the rest in some miscellaneous hands. The rest of that stack in some miscellaneous hands. Rebought again, and I'll say for this second hand that I want to mention, I'm probably sitting with a stack of about 110 to 120 left at this point. So I've got ace queen. I'm in the big blind again. It's still 6-handed, and the gambler straddles for $5. The player after him raises to $15. The button player calls the $15, and I decided to just push all in here. Raising to 60 or 65 doesn't make sense when it's effectively half or a little more than half of my stack. So I shove all in with my ace queen, assuming it's probably the best, or I'm up against a coin flip. The gambler player that I mentioned decides to go all in behind me. He barely got me covered, so it's effectively a call with a little bit extra. And then the initial raiser and the other player fold behind. So it's basically a heads up. We're going to see the whole board, and the flop comes out. If I remember correctly, it was something like Jack 6-2. We see another Jack on the turn. I don't improve, and the river's a 7. So I flip over my hand. I got to show my ace. I'm hoping it's good, and my opponent shows 10-7 offsuit for a rivered pair of 7s. So we get pretty unlucky there. Not much you can do, but I only brought $300 with me to play for the day, and I wasn't necessarily. I was kind of up in the air on whether I was going to play for the day in the first place. I wasn't feeling very energetic, so I decided not to get any more cash in the game for the day, and called it quits at that point. I will be sharing another session in a moment here. But before I get into that, there's one thing I will call out from that session that relates to this first losing session I had. So the next session I played, I'm in the middle of a hand, or in between hands, I think, actually, and I hear a lady behind me start to loudly berate somebody. And, I say berate loosely, and it sounds kind of jokingly, but I hear her say, "You're so bad at poker, you're terrible at poker." And I turn around, and I see she's talking to the same gambler player that I just mentioned here. The way she's saying it, I think that they have a history. It sounded like it to me anyway. And so, I don't think it was just somebody being mean at the table necessarily. I think she was just kind of going at her friend, somebody that she's used to playing with over the course of time. But it made me laugh just because, that's kind of how I felt in the moment. He's just wanting to get his money in the pot, wanting to see what happens. He's just a gambler player, I guess, is kind of his mantra. But it just didn't work out for us this time. So the next session I played was a better session. It didn't last 30 minutes. It was actually a 2.5-hour session. I initially had the same problem with the camera, but I didn't realize it, so I missed the first couple of hands, and really, there's just one hand in particular that I would have shared in this vlog, and I'll just kind of talk through what happened, the bare basics of it. So there's a PLO bomb pot. There's probably 8 or 9 players of the flop, so it's $40 or $45 pot. So I'll say what the flop was. It was the top board was a 4-10-4 flop, and the bottom board was queen high. I've got a queen 4 in my hand, so I flopped trips on the top board and top pair on a coordinated bottom board, I remember. So I wasn't really looking for anything on the bottom board. I was kind of hoping my trips were good on the top board. But I didn't want to overplay them. I only had the queen kicker. Somebody else could have a better kicker if they've got a 4, or somebody could have pocket 10s for the boat already. So I check, and I recall it checked all the way around on the flop. The turn didn't really change much on either board for me. I still essentially had the trips, nothing on the bottom board. Based upon the fact that it checked around the flopped, I felt comfortable enough betting there, so I threw out $25, and I got, I think it was 3 or 4 callers. And then on the river, my trips didn't improve, but it wasn't a coordinated board in the sense that no flushes would have completed. There were no straights on the board. I probably would have just been losing to a boat or a bigger 4. Given the play, though, the fact that nobody's raised, I decided that I'm probably in a good spot that I could bet and fold if I get raised. So I decided to bet. I bet half pot for $75. I ended up getting a couple callers. So the pot was about, let's say, $300 roughly, and my 3-4s were good, so I won half the pot for $150. The next hand is a PLO bum pot with 7 players to the flop. I'm dealt queen jack 8-6 with clubs and spades. The flop comes 3-8-10 with 2 clubs on top, and 5-2 queen with 2 hearts on bottom. I've got second pair, a gut shot straight draw, and a club flush draw on the top, and on bottom I've got top pair and a backdoor club draw. I check, given that my hand is weak as it stands, and I don't want to overplay my draw. A player a couple seats to my left bets $15. 3 players call, and I call as well since I'm getting a good price to see the turn. The pot's $110. The turn brings the 7 of clubs on top and the 4 clubs on bottom. I pick up the flush, but it's jack high, and I could still be losing to a higher flush here. I check with the intention of check calling at this point, depending on the action. When it checks all the way around, I feel pretty good about my jack high flush. The river brings the 2 of diamonds on top and the 4 diamonds on bottom. The board doesn't pair on top, so my flush is still hopefully best. I pick up 2 pair on bottom, though I'm not expecting to win anything with it. Given the earlier action, I lead for $75. 1 player to my left calls all in for $45. It then folds around to the woman on my right, who is pretty reluctant to call, but ends up putting the chips in. The pot's $305. The woman and I show our hands for the side pot, and she reveals that she has the 9 high club flush on top, and it turns out my 2 pair is good on bottom as well, so I scoop the $60 side pot. The all-in player reveals his hand, showing 4-2 for a boat on bottom. I win the top half for $125 more.
Oh, you got the 9-6, 9-5.
This next hand I'm dealt ace-jack suited in spades. I'm sitting in middle position. There's 1 or 2 limpers, and I raise to $10. 4 players call. The pot's about $50. The flop brings king, queen, 6, rainbow. I miss the flop, but I have a gut shot to the straight. Given the number of players in the pot, though, and the fact that there are 3 players left to act behind me, I decided check makes the most sense when it's checked to me. The button ends up betting $5. The small blind calls, the big blind folds, I call, and the cutoff calls, bringing the pot to $70 with 4 players to the turn. The turn brings the ace of diamonds. I pick up top pair here, but it's a coordinated board with enough players that I have to be concerned about a straight or 2 pair. It checks around to the button again, who bets $5 into a $70 pot. The small blind calls, and at this point I feel like there's a good chance I have the best hand. I can't imagine a hand that beats mine doesn't bet more or raise the $5 bet. Given that, I feel like a raise to protect my hand is best, so I make it $40. Everyone ends up folding, and I pick up the pot for $85.
What's that ace here, though? Boys, you got that. You got that. You had a queen on? I had a queen too, man.
This next hand is a PLO bomb pot with 7 players to the flop. I'm dealt ace 8-3-2 rainbow. The flop comes queen queen 8 with 2 spades on top and 2 jack 4 rainbow on bottom. I've got 2 pair on top, though I can't imagine it's good since anyone holding a queen has me beat, and bottom pair with a wheel draw on the bottom board. It checks around, so we get to see a free turn. The turn brings the 9 of spades on top and the 5 of diamonds on bottom. We pick up the wheel draw on the bottom board, though we're losing to anyone holding 6-3 for a higher straight. It checks around to the last player who bets $15 into the $35 pot. The small blind, the big blind, and the early position players all call. I can't imagine anyone holding the nuts on either board would bet less than the pot at this point, or raise the initial better, so I feel like my straight must be good on the bottom board. I could have possibly made a thin value raise here, but I think calling is the safer option, which is what I go with. The pot's now $110 with 5 players to the river. The river brings the ace of clubs on top and the king of spades on bottom. It checks around to the same player who bets $50. Everyone calls, though looking back, I really think I could have raised here safely. I don't regret the call though, as 5 players head to showdown in a $360 pot. I'm pleased as no one reveals a higher straight, although we do see the early position player show that he has the same straight as us, meaning that we're getting quartered on the bottom board. I don't mind getting quartered here since there are more than 4 players in the pot, and we're still making money from this hand. I committed $70 to the pot to win $90.
Unfortunately, that king on the river I know caught me.
Thank you. For this next hand, I'm dealt king, queen suited, and clubs in the cutoff. There's one limper, and I get a little ambitious and I raise to $15. I end up getting 2 callers, the small blind and the early position limper. The flop comes ace, 9, 10 with 2 hearts. I'm most likely to be holding an ace here given my pre-flop raising range, so I continuation bet for $30 when it checks to me. The small blind ends up re-raising all in for about $100 more. I obviously can't continue, so I fold, and he shows 9-8 offsuit for bottom pair. After this hand, this player makes it clear that he's been playing for about 8 hours at this point and has lost about $700 and is just looking to lose the rest of his stack so he can go home. He's a really friendly guy that I enjoy having at the table, but his comment definitely helps to give some insight into how to play with him in future hands. In the next notable hand, I'm dealt queen 9 suited in hearts. I'm sitting in middle position. 2 players before me limp in, and I call as well. Another player behind raises to $10. 5 players call, including myself, bringing the pot to $60, and we've got 6 players to the flop. The flop comes 9-9-8 with 2 diamonds. I flop trips, and barring some crazy action, I intend to get to showdown with this hand. It checks to me, and I lead for $35. The cutoff, who is the same fun player from the last hand, ends up calling, along with the early position player, bringing the pot to $165. The turn brings the jack of hearts. It checks to me, and I grab a stack intending to bet $100. It turns out my stacks are off, though, and I end up betting $90. The fun player thinks for a long time and ends up calling, and the third player folds. The pot's now $345. The river brings the 6 of diamonds. I'm committed at this point given our stack sizes, even though I'm worried about the flush coming in. I push all in for $141 with my opponent barely covering me. After thinking for a long time, my opponent finally makes the call. I show my hand, and thankfully, he mucks. This fun player is now down to his last $24, and at this point I'm rooting for him to win, though not necessarily against me. He wins pots by shoving all in pre-flop with hands like 3-2 suited and 5-2 off following this one, and starts joking about how he needs 2s to win, and undoubtedly hits when he plays a deuce.
Okay, have a good one. Thank you. Thanks.
In the next hand, I'm dealt ace-10 offsuit. Before the flop, I raised to $10, and the fun player from earlier calls with 2 other players as well. The flop comes Jack, King, Jack with 2 hearts. I flop a gut shot, but I imagine there's a chance someone else has hit this flop. I check, as does everyone else. The turn brings the 5 of clubs. The early position player leads for $10. I call given the price in hopes of hitting my gut shot, or perhaps an ace if it's still good given the weak bet size. Both other players call as well, bringing the pot to $82. The river brings in the 8 of hearts, completing the flush. I don't improve, and I'm giving up on this hand. It ends up checking around though, and I reveal my ace high since the action indicates it might actually be good. Oddly, the fun player checked behind in position with Jack 10 suited, showing that he flopped trips and didn't play it hard at all. He joked earlier about winning with terrible low cards and losing with premium big cards, and I guess he's let that influence his play when he's actually in a really good spot. In this next hand, I'm dealt King 4 suited in diamonds in middle position. The under the gun player raises to $15. The player to my right calls, I call, and the big blind calls. The pot's $61. The flop brings King, King 4 with 2 spades. I flop the absolute nuts. The under the gun player leads for $40. The player to my right folds. I consider flatting here to give my opponent the chance to hang himself, but the strength of his continuation bet combined with the fact that he raised under the gun led me to believe that there's a good chance he's got a hand like Ace-King, and we could get all his chips here. For that reason, I raised to $100, expecting at least a call. The player to my left folds, and unfortunately so does the player that I thought had a king in his hand. Reflecting on this hand now, I think a call is a better play here, even if my opponent does have a king. By calling, I could be representing a king here, but it could also be interpreted as smaller pocket pair, or even bottom pair that's speculative of the better, as well as a flush draw looking to hit another spade. By not showing immediate strength with a raise, other players that may legitimately be in one of those scenarios might be more inclined to come along in the hand, and the initial bettor might be encouraged to continue if he's got a pair in his hand as well. I'll have to keep that in mind for next time, but I'm happy to take the win here. In this next PLO bomb pot hand, I'm dealt Queen Jack 8-6 with 3 spades. I'm sitting on the button. There's 6 players to the flop. The flop comes 7 King 5, all clubs on top, and 2 Queen 10, all spades on bottom. I flop a jack high flush on the bottom board with nothing but top pair on the top board. When it checks around to me, I decide to make a bet assuming my flush could be good here. I bet $25 and only the small blind calls. The pot's $80. The turn brings the jack of hearts on top and the jack of clubs on bottom. I pick up 2 pair on top and my flush is unchanged on bottom. I bet $50 after my opponent checks to me and he immediately calls again, bringing the pot to $180. It's pretty clear that we've both got a flush, and I don't expect him to fold for any bet size given how he's played previous hands. When the river brings an inconsequential 5 on top and 3 on the bottom, my hand is unchanged on both boards, and given that I don't have the nuts and that I'm certain my opponent isn't folding it to any bet, I decide to check behind here. As expected, he shows 8-7-6-4 with the 8-6 of clubs for the flush on the top board, and we chop the pot, winning $90 each. In the last noteworthy hand of my session, I'm dealt Jack 10 offsuit. There's 1 limper, and I raise to $11. The player to my left calls, and everyone else folds. The pot's now $27. The flop comes 5-7-9 with 2 hearts. Knowing that this opponent doesn't like to fold, I hastily decide to check. I didn't give myself enough time to think though, because as soon as I check, I reconsider what I should have done here. Ideally, I think a better play would have been to bet $15. I've got 2 overcards and a gut shot, and if my opponent has nothing here, there's still a chance he'll fold. By checking, I'm giving him the chance to steal, and potentially making it more expensive for myself to call in hopes of improving. Unfortunately, as predicted, my opponent ends up betting $25. I don't think I can fold at this point though, so I end up calling, hoping for a helpful turn. The pot's $77. The turn pairs the board, bringing the 9 of diamonds. I've got no help, and the way I've played the hand at this point, I think I have to pretty much give up. I check, and after my opponent bets $50, I fold. So as you can see, the second session went much better than the first one. That first session I said I lost $300, bought in twice for $150, out for 0. And then the second session I bought in for $150 once. I cashed out for $585 for winnings of $435 there. So between the 2 sessions, it gives me a win of $135, not counting other expenses. So hopefully we don't have a bad run like I did in that first session again anytime soon, or at least, I get to play longer than 30 minutes before losing $300. It's nice to at least enjoy the time there before I lose. But overall, I'm continuing to win in the long run across my sessions. Some of them are big wins, some of them are small wins. Obviously, I've got some losses to balance it out. But I'm going to keep going. I haven't really made clear in my vlog previously what my goal is. So I thought I'd just kind of call that out here as part of my summary. So what I'm trying to do is reach $10,000 playing at 1-2 no limit and including these bomb pot hands as well. So my goal is to reach a $10,000 poker bankroll so that I can make an attempt at playing some 2-5 no limit after that. I might, depending on how I feel, take a small stab at that somewhere along the way, but really I just wanted to reach a 10K bankroll first before making that attempt if I could, just to kind of prove to myself that I can keep the flow going, and that I am a long-term winning player based upon a number of hands that can kind of demonstrate that. So I feel pretty confident about it since I did play poker for a living many years ago, but it has been a long time since then that I've played before getting back into it recently. So, just kind of rebuilding that confidence and trust in myself, making sure that I'm analyzing my hands. I'm going to keep going down this road. It's nice to kind of reflect on my hands in these videos because, it's you get like a secondary look at it. So I've actually feel like I've learned more from recording my hands here and analyzing them as part of the vlog than I have probably any time I played poker in the past, which is nice. I guess that's really it for now. I'd encourage you, if you could, to like and subscribe the video. It helps the algorithm for people to find me. And if you have any feedback on the video format, anything you like, anything you don't like, I'm really open to feedback. I want to make the vlog grow and improve, and I'm looking for anything you might have to offer to me. I appreciate it. Until next time, so long.